Hi, welcome to another exciting episode, the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show and definitely another exciting guest. Let me tell you where we're going with this show. I looked at the bio and was like, okay, this is thorough. And let me explain to you what I mean by thorough. Usually when guests fill out a questionnaire, it's usually right to the point, maybe a few lines here and there. So I'm looking at this beautiful young lady's bio, and I said, shit. The more I kept going, it just kept going. Then I said to myself, what does she do for a living? HR, human resource. That means she's thorough to every degree. But let me tell you something about HR people, which we had an HR celebrity on before, and I was truly amazed by their responsibilities. But what I'm learning out even more with the conversation with the beautiful young lady we're getting ready to interview is HR people have a tendency to almost have like this superpower, like this foresight, like they can kind of they can kind of look through you and see if you're full of shit. Basically, what I'm trying to say, or if you have the capabilities to meet. But with that, you also deal with a lot of their responsibilities go beyond bringing you into the sector. Is trying to see if you can adapt, if you're going to get burnt out, just all kind of things. But then think of it like this: what is her job like? What is it like when she goes home? What is her responsibilities? How much pressure is put on her to make sure that she finds the right people to fill a role? Interesting. On the Day Show, we're going to talk to a beautiful young lady who definitely has that beast mindset, who took corporate America and decided to take it to a different level and start her own organization, her own, let me put it like this, giving back what she has been taught. Let's welcome to the show, Miss, make sure I get the name right, Sira Laurel. Did I get it right?
That's right.
That's an interesting name. What origin is that?
Sira is a Hebrew name.
Okay.
Yeah. And Laurel is the etymology of that I'm not aware of, but my mom's first marriage was into a Jewish family, and the grandmother's name was Sira, and she thought it was just so unique that when she married very young, they ended up getting divorced. But years later, when she ended up meeting my dad, she had held on to the name. So that's how
beautiful
that
name.
came
When I
about.
looked at it, I was like, okay, it's spelled different, but I was like, okay, I'll make sure I pronounce it right. Thank you for coming on the show. Let's go here. You're in beautiful San Francisco. Before we get started on this journey, tell the viewers a little about who you are.
Sure. So I am the now founder and CEO of a consultancy called North of Normal, which is a leadership coaching and consulting firm that's focused on neuro leadership, which supports highly sensitive and neurodivergent leaders build work lives that actually work on their terms. And so I specialize in upgrading what I call our internal operating system, right? By understanding what's going on in here in the brain body connection, which helps leaders manage their nervous system to avoid burnout and lead more effectively.
Okay, let's go deeper here. You actually came from the HR sector. How did the HR sector get you to this part of your journey? Because like I said before, we had a young lady that was on last season or 2 seasons ago that was in HR, and I learned so much of the responsibilities that you guys have. You're talking about something that's almost fundamentally new when you talk about hypersensitive and different ways to take a person to another level. What made you switch? What made you so invoked in this versus just basic HR work?
So I exited my undergrad with really no idea what I wanted to do. And I took a role inside of a small company, and I had a wonderful mentor who helped me like navigate this organizational system, which was something that I'd never experienced before. But because I am a highly sensitive person and I do pick up on the subtleties in my environment, and whether that's a social sensitivity and social dynamics, or it's emotional sensitivity and the emotional cues that I'm picking up on, or the attention to detail that's also heightened. There's actually 6 different subscales of sensory processing sensitivity. I was able to go to my mentor in this environment and say, like, what the heck is going on? How do I navigate this? And I really flourished in that environment. But what I noticed year after year was that we really didn't have anyone specifically cast in the role of human resources. This is also terminology that I really didn't have at the time. Like, I'm exiting college, nobody teaches you what you're supposed to expect, or what is, what your rights are, right, when you get into an employment scenario. And I just found myself gravitating, as I became a people manager and then ultimately was managing this practice, I was gravitating towards the people side of the business. How do we make sure that people feel like they're paid fairly, that we're not creating us them dynamics, we're not siloing ourselves, that we actually know what to do, right? We have the right training that we need to like do each of our jobs really well. And I call that the qualitative side of the business. And for this, that, the other reason, I started to get really interested in human resources. Having today, I think a young person might say, I used AI, to explore different career paths. I used Google to do some searching and do some research, and I found organizational development as a path, and human resources as a role type, where I could help design an employee experience, the kind that I would have always wanted, and be the confidential resource I never had. And so I took myself to San Francisco and put myself in a graduate program specifically for organizational development. And I took my first human resources manager role at a construction company in San Francisco. And that started my next 10 years. Because my first 5 years were spent in my hometown in that medical company, managing really the revenue side of business. And then the next 10 years were spent in strategic human resources roles.
When you said something that I think is pretty profound. You said you put yourself in the position of the people that you were overseeing or managing or trying to make their lives better in the workforce. What were some of the most impactful parts of that journey? Because most human resources people do not put themselves in the position of the people that they're overseeing, or they put into roles with inside the company. So what were some of the things that really impacted you, that you said, wow, this has to change, because if that was me, I would want to see that change happen?
Yeah, there were a few things. Some of the relatively normal stuff was that nobody seemed to have any attention to training. And I thought it was wholly unfair that I was being asked to like achieve more and ascend in role and responsibility and just figure it out. That was our leadership development practice. So that's how I kind of got thinking about like training and development and helping people succeed in their roles. I was frustrated with my own compensation and not understanding why I was getting paid what I was getting paid. And so that then took me into, well, how do I know that I'm being paid fairly or anyone else is being paid fairly? And if the fact that people have to just like talk about it behind closed doors to really understand, like that just seemed just again unfair and ineffective, and was a surefire way of eroding trust in the leadership. I also, unfortunately, was subject to sexual harassment in this first corporate experience, and would have wanted somebody to report that to, and that didn't exist.
Wow. So that's a good question. How did you approach these situations when they was happening? There was nobody there. So how did you create an environment for yourself? Did you walk away from it? You mentioned the sexual harassment. You mentioned getting thrown into the fires. Then it's another part of this question too. With the development that you got with your new company, what do you think is the percentage that a lot of people are dealing with just those two in particular issues, because we get a lot of people coming out of college who may have this degree, but they're thrown to the lions. Then it's almost like you figure it out, and then the pressure's put on.
Mhm. Yeah. One, I mean, we're spending millions and millions of dollars a year on leadership development that is not working. It's a one size fits all approach. It is theoretical, not experiential. It is not taking into account different learning styles. There's a whole host of reasons why our traditional and more commonplace leadership development isn't working for anybody. It's also often too little, too late. When you put someone into a management role and you're like, do this thing, or you put someone in a management role and you're like, now take this 6 week training and like, you're good. That's not the way development works. That's not the way learning works. And there should be many more opportunities early where I think of it like an apprenticeship would be a much better model, right? Mentored experience is really how we should be, in my view, teaching up and coming leaders how to lead, how to manage complexity, how to influence, right, across the aisle. It's learning from somebody who's been there before, and also right at moments of opportunity, infusing those formal learning mechanisms where you are taking a class, or you are enrolled in a course, or you're even learning your learning and using your learning and development budget to to have someone read a book. Right, there's all sorts of ways that people can learn. Giving them the flexibility to do that in a way that works with their learning style is huge, right? We needed to build in that flexibility, but also you need to have somebody you can turn to. And I had that in my first 5 years. So I had an introduction in some part to like the way things could be or should be, which I had an executive sponsor. I had someone I could turn to when I was like, I'm really insecure about doing this, or like this experience happened with this peer of mine, or who was a peer who I'm now managing. How do I deal with this dynamic? And was able to talk to somebody about that. So at least I had a safe space. But oftentimes, what I was still getting, from that person was kind of like the toughen up, this is just the way it is. They'll get over it type of feedback that didn't really help me deal with the dynamics at play in this office. So I self taught, right? I put myself into a master's program. I consumed every book I possibly could about leadership and social dynamics. Emotional intelligence was a soapbox that I was on, and helping people have critical conversations with each other before things erupted. So I just had an aggressive appetite for learning, and I had to lean into that because I wasn't getting it from my environment.
You mentioned emotional intelligence. That was the word that I used quite often. You've been in the field for quite some time. The question is, how many, how often were you put in situations that you knew the candidate was not leadership or emotional ready to tackle these things, but the pressure of production overseed that? And then, roughly, are most people, because they come out of college, are they really ready to be leaders? Let's be real. I've always had this philosophy that the system, which we're talking about, because I like the way you use that word, the system is designed to create laborers, a labor force, not a leadership role, not a mentorship role. So there's probably more followers in the system than there are leaders, because I would think you will have to have a strong emotional intelligence to be able to be a critical thinker, to be able to think outside the box, to assess critical, to be a critical thinker. I don't think a lot of people in this day and age have that capability. So, and with that being said, are they really ready to be leaders even though they come out of college with a degree?
No. And that is not their fault, right? That we've designed educational systems that don't prepare people for the real world.
Okay.
We have all of this core curriculum that's required.
Right.
When is somebody actually using calculus unless they're actually doing that for their job?
Right.
Right? Like we have all these core requirements that people don't actually use. And we've taken courses out of early education and even college that somebody might want to pursue,
Mm.
like the arts, right?
Right.
And we've just funneled everybody towards these really narrow opportunities. And we even took, home ec. Home ec doesn't exist, right? Where people learn how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah.
And yet, okay, go to college, right? Like learn how to pay rent, spend money on your college experience and other bills. And then, okay, now you have a job and you maybe you have a good paying job, but do you know how to manage your money in a responsible way? No. And the babying that happens inside of specifically tech organizations where like now we're doing your laundry for you and et cetera, like none of this is preparing people to for self leadership. Self leadership is fundamentally the first level of leadership, and that requires a high degree of self awareness, which is required at every other level of leadership, of course. But it's fundamentally you are leading yourself. Whether you ever have a formal role, right, as a leader, you are leading yourself in this life. Self-awareness is first and foremost, and with that, right, you're understanding how this system works and what your responses are to environmental changes, right, what your stress responses are. Then you can get into like the self-regulation that's required to be emotionally intelligent. How do I mitigate this emotional experience that I'm having right now because somebody said something that was stupid?
Right.
Right, and I don't want to impact this relationship even if I think that was a dumb thing to say. I want to maintain, right, a sense of uh, of control. And
Right.
that's the next layer is self control. You got to breathe in the moment, right? You got to learn how to navigate what's going on inside of you in order to make that next move, which is self control. Knowing when you're frustrated, knowing when you're tired, knowing what that does to your executive functioning. I can get a little snappy. I can get a little quiet. I can, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And then self-compassion and these other layers, right, of emotional intelligence, where once you have all those self pieces together,
Mhm.
only then can you move on to empathy and think about others.
Right.
So there's so many foundational self components of emotional intelligence, and we are not preparing people to self lead. And yeah, for me, as you're answering your question, right, it's like how often were people put in these roles, or we were asking people to do things that they weren't ready to do? It was all the time. And the excuse is always, we don't have enough time. We don't
Right.
have time to train. We don't have time to that. Uh, it's this is part of the reality of the human brain. Is that we do make short term decisions, which is I'm going to save time now. I'll do it myself instead of teaching this person how to do it.
Right.
Um, and I'll just put them in a role because that's what happened to me. And if I figured it out, so can they.
Right.
Right. So there's all sorts of aspects at play when we make these decisions, but we are not that great at thinking about the second and third order effects, right? The long term ramifications of the decisions we make today. And we just don't calculate that the time that you're not spending now on training that person, on giving them feedback on how they did on an assignment, is costing you time, right? Mistakes, reversals later.
Mhm. How do you? Let's go. Let's talk about you. Let's put you in this role. When did you start to understanding and get a clear understanding this isn't what you want to do? Knowing that the system is not ready at this time for that level of emotional intelligence. So let me break it down where it make a little bit more sense. Like you just said, you use AI. We now have automatically switched our brain to adapt to the new technology to enhance ourselves. So my question to you is: has the new level of technology helped to create better leaders in your viewpoint?
Mm. Yeah. So your first question, when did I realize this wasn't for
Yeah.
me? I did experience a professional breaking point, right? Where in attempting to meet the needs of everyone else around me,
Mhm.
which was to get them the help they needed, the training they needed, the mentorship they needed, to be that confidential resource that I never had, I burned out. Right. I had an incredibly demanding corporate leadership career that was forcing masking and always being on and, stoic, unemotional leadership. And after 10 years of doing that, I just slowly but surely ignored my needs to the point where my body was like, you're not going to tell us what to do anymore. Um,
Did
so
you
I
have a
then,
mental breakdown? Because usually when
yeah,
there's a burnout, and my burnout wasn't like yours, it was more um, surgeries from what I did for a living. But I don't think it was a burnout. I just really didn't want to do it anymore. Does that make any sense?
yeah,
It
yeah,
didn't,
yeah, definitely.
I didn't get to the point to where it affected me mentally. Uh,
Hmm.
so with you, did what were some of the ramifications of your burnout?
Definitely. High anxiety and exhaustion to the point of non-function. I was at when my brain, right, and my mind was finally willing to like listen to the signals my body was sending. I was unable to get out of like a horizontal position for more than 20, 30 minutes at a time before having to go right back down. I'd take a meeting virtually, I'd be there barely just doing the task, and then I'd go right back down to lying on the couch or being in bed. So the physical exhaustion was such that I was barely functioning in my role. I was meeting all of my performance expectations, and everything else right in my life was non functional.
Did they see this? Did they offer any type of assistance in the breakdown? Did they even know you had a breakdown? It's probably like, okay, this is what I tell people. In corporate, in any job title, this is what I mean when I say emotional intelligence. I can't grasp my thought around this, and you probably can because of your title and what you do now. I'm gonna use this as an example. I was a fitness director for Daimler Chrysler in the Ford plant and in Avon Lake, Ohio, and Twinsburg, Ohio. I remember this to this very day. So just remember, these individuals have been working for this company for years, family generation. They put all of their time and effort into that system. And I remember going to HR one time, and it was funny. It was almost like seeing cattle because they was like, "Hey, Andre, you need to put a fitness program together because they're not even using the gym." My job was to go in there and keep them healthy and to keep productivity going because the number of absenteeisms were out the roof. They don't make money like that. They have to pay out money. So when it was they got bought out, and it was so funny, they got bought out by a company who's I won't mention their name. They do a 5 year, 10 year plan. So they made all these individuals take a buyout. Well, they was pissed. They go, well, union's going to protect us. I said, union's not going to protect you from a company that wants to buy you out. It's not. That's not how that works. You know. So I asked a couple of them. I said, well, what did you do with your money? How long you been here? I've been here 40, 50 years. And you tied your whole life to this and didn't invest in yourself. So this goes back to what we talked about at first. That critical thinking. Your thinking was subjected to based in everything on this company that you don't even know who the owner is. I don't even know who owns McDonald's. So you invested all this time. Now they're kicking you out the door. So my question here as an HR person, why can't people think outside the box with this way of thinking? It seemed like to me if I was in that role, I would be thinking, why am I putting so much effort into this versus putting effort into my own self? Does that make any sense? What I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that I think is why actually a lot of people do burn out. And it's certainly why I burned out is that I have always been an out of box thinker. I'm the one who's bringing these ideas to the table of, people people problems are profit problems.
Right.
So people solutions are also profit solutions.
Right.
So let's make sure people want to come to work and that they feel like they're working for a good manager and that they got the training they need. And so, like, they will then put tenfold the energy into your company that you are putting into them.
Right.
So that's out of the box thinking for so many organizations, right? It's like, wait, what? I pay them. That's why they should be giving me all of themselves. Like, I pay them. And it's like, no, that's not enough. Um, and it's not enough for the majority of people. There's a small, really, like, percentage of people who are just motivated by monetary value, and then there's just a lot of intangible, right, benefit that people are looking for, the meaning, right, in their work and such, so forth. So why do people get stuck there? Safety and security, and a false sense that there's no other way, that every other organization is exactly like this, that they hear stories from other people who are laid off and they're like, oh, I got to stay here. Yeah,
So,
that there every instance has been like that, right? I had at least first 5 years, while there was a bunch of stuff that was like not great, I had enough good, just like in a personal relationship, right? If you're in uh bad relationships, that's all you experience. Like, you don't know what healthy is.
right.
And that's, I think, true for people at work. Is like, we don't know what healthy is. And so, yeah, you've got these ideas and you're like, right, you may not even be able to place that, right? So, like, this is not for me. I'm a paradigm shifting leader. I should be doing something creative and outside the box, and etc. And if only I was in an environment that allowed me to grow, right, in the way that I need to,
Right.
right? Like, I just need the nutrients to be like that. And organizations are not designed to give you the nutrients you need to do the best you can.
How often did individuals come to you with problems solving solutions that they were dealing with, and what were some of those?
Yes. Often the disconnect between what's going on, like, on the floor, and what leadership is doing, and the decisions they're making. And this would be the executive team, senior leadership. We don't feel connected to them. We can't trust them. They're not clearly communicating what they're doing, or it's erratic, or I can't trust the communication because they said this in January and now they're saying this in March. Like, what am I supposed to believe? Our goals are unclear, so I don't know what I'm supposed to be working on. I don't feel my compensation is fair. I think my manager's poorly trained and I don't want to work with them anymore. Train the managers. Um, yeah, everything that you could think of would come past my desk
How do
at
you
some
deal
point.
with something like that where, and I heard that recently from somebody. It was like, my manager sucks. And I'm like, okay, well, go to your HR. The HR doesn't do anything. So,
Mhm.
really, does HR have a place? Let me put it a different way. Is HR just a way for the followers or the ones who don't have the status to go and vent, because it's really not going to go any further? You don't have the capabilities to go and keep stepping on people's toes. Like, would you go back to someone who's getting complaint that they're not qualified to be in this position, but you hired them in? How do you handle something like that? You go back and address the situation?
Yes. So I have worked myself out of leadership teams for being direct with my team about the type of culture we were creating by,
Give me an example when you say work
yeah,
yourself out.
uh, out of favor, and sometimes completely out of an organization,
Wow.
because I'm the accountability person, right, in the room, and I'm the one who's saying, that's great, we have a policy around this, but if we don't follow the policy, then people don't trust us anymore, and that's why we're seeing turnover. And I can point directly to that in our engagement surveys, right? I have data, guys, gals, to show you
Mhm.
that our behavior is creating this mess, whether we like it or not. We need to address that. We need to acknowledge that we are being unclear, right? Or we're being inconsistent, or being unfair. We're not making decisions as fast as we should be. And the reason for that is because we're biased. towards Bob, the salesperson, who's making a lot of money for us, but is a jerk.
Mm. You didn't stand.
That's why.
They didn't probably want you around too much, did they?
No.
But but
Yeah.
but with that being said, think about it. How many other HR people, like I said, we had a lady on that was on HR and she walked away for that very reason. She said, nobody took what I was saying seriously. It
Mhm.
was get the production done, get them in the door, and get them out. We'll deal with the aftermath. But think about it: how many things could have been easily resolved the way you said, versus you doing something to an employee that could injure them mentally, physically, emotionally, and could cause a major lawsuit? Then you're really screwed.
Oh yeah, and certainly had to deal with that, of course, where you don't ever, of course, tell a CEO, "I told you so," but when you're dealing with the lawsuit and you're like, "Yeah, okay, well, let's clean up the mess that we didn't have to make."
Yeah.
That I foresaw this coming, and we could have done A, B, and C. Let's do a retrospective on how we got here. Yeah,
Oh, so that did happen to
didn't make
you in
friends.
your time as a
Mm.
as a leader, really? How do you
Hmm.
who do they rely on to debunk the situation? Do they put, because the blame has to go on somebody? When somebody screws up, who's usually getting the finger pointed at them? Is it the CEO? Is it the chief? Or is it HR?
Oh, it's HR. It's of course,
Really?
it's
Why?
HR.
Because you brought them
Yeah.
in.
Oh, well, let me clarify maybe your question. If the leadership team wants to know where the problem is, it's in HR not solving the problem. Right, so that's where the blame goes. Do we have a retention problem? That's HR to solve. Do we have a training problem? That's HR to solve. Do we have a us them dynamic between the employees and the C-suite? That's on HR to solve. But when HR then tries to solve those things, and somebody doesn't like to have a mirror held up to them, and then the thing still happens, it's still back on HR's plate, right? As this is your problem, and why haven't you solved this? And so there's a lot of looking outside of oneself, right,
Yeah.
around to the system. We're like, oh well, I think the problem's over here. I think we need to just deliver some training. I think we just put a band-aid on whatever this thing is, or we separate these two instead of actually solving the rift in a relationship. We just separate them, put them on different teams, that type of thing. Um, yeah, speaking of hiring, I mean, certainly that's where the documentation comes into play, and why HR folks are so thorough is because when we make a recommendation to not hire someone, I want that on record, that I'm not the ultimate decision maker here in this interview process. It could be the CEO if it's an executive candidate, or it's the hiring manager, right, if it's an individual contributor. And we go through the process, right, as tightly as possible,
Mhm.
right, with few exceptions as possible. And I'm documenting, right, every step of the way where we've skipped a step, where somebody has gone around the process, like directly to the CEO to say, well, I know this person and they're really great, so I think we should bring Joe in here.
Mhm.
And then the CEO says, yes, let's do it. Yeah, you have to document those things, and HR has to document those things too. They're often doing it to protect the company, but they're also doing it to protect themselves.
How often are HR people? I know you don't know the exact number, but let me use you for example. This is your platform. How many times have you been basically told off the record to turn the other cheek for nepotism, so to speak, like you just said, knowing that that person wasn't capable, knowing that they can cause more damage? We've seen something like this in the movie Casino, where and when Robert De Niro had to hire the guy that ran the slot machines, and they were losing money, and he fired him and said, "Hey man, check this out. You can't fire him because he's such and such uncle." And Robert said, "Everybody here is kin to somebody, you know." So what was that like for you?
That has happened at every single company I've ever worked
Really?
at every single company any of my peers have ever worked at, other HR directors. We all talk about this. And our job is to minimize it, right? Wherever possible, is to minimize that bias and the nepotism that exists. Yeah, and the shortcuts that people want to take.
And your idea when you're looking for candidates, and we're going to talk about your business because all this resonates. When you're looking for candidates for, let's say, a leadership, let's go with all the candidates. When you're looking for leadership, when you're looking for production, when you're looking for management, what are the skill traits that you look at, or what is the not skill trait? Let me rephrase this. What is the emotional intelligence package that you're looking for with each one of these type of categories as an HR specialist?
hmm So when I am interviewing a candidate, of course, there's a set of technical skills that if I'm hiring for a software engineering role, I want to know that they can code. Or maybe today I want to know that they know what Claude is and they can vibe code. And I want to know that they understand the technical component of their role for the level that they've been hired into, and that they have, 80% of what the role requires, because they're not going to know 100% of the job,
Right.
of the technical aspects, and they can learn by osmosis. That's why we have teams. That's why we have people of all different levels of seniority and expertise, is that we can leverage that, right, to get someone, performing at 100% of expectation. Outside of the technical component, which is honestly pretty easy, and I'm looking for self-awareness, right? Do they have a literacy of their own operating system? Right? Do they know how to read themselves, and do they know how others read them?
Mm-hmm.
And can they then adapt to the situation, which is also part of emotional intelligence, is that I have a tendency to be X, Y, and Z way. Maybe it's, super assertive in a meeting. I have a tendency to be the first one to raise my hand, right? I'm contributing to that. What I also make sure to do is not talk the whole time, right? I make sure to get everyone's voice in a meeting. I pay attention to when somebody's being really quiet, and I might take a step back and ask somebody what their thoughts are, or I might take them aside after a meeting and say, "Hey, I did see you, contribute. Did you have anything you wanted to say about, the project?"
Mm-hmm.
So that type of like consciousness, right, and conscientiousness and caring. And you can get at that through behavioral based interview questions where you're asking people to describe a time when, and that you're looking for, specific elements. I fully believe in prepping people for interviews, that
Mm-hmm.
this is the type of interview you're going into. This is what I'm looking for. I am looking for emotional intelligence, examples of emotional intelligence, strategic and adaptive thinking, for, times where you've been collaborative. Those are the types of questions that you're going to get in this HR screen. And then their brain is prepared, right? That they've got so much, right, that they could pull from. Now they know what I'm looking for. And that's not, I think it's fair to offer that to a candidate so that they can, go into the depths of their experience and bring a complete answer that describes the situation, their behavior, the impact, and their intent.
What is the number one? Give me three things that people stumble across when they come in to your office, or when they come in to be interviewed. The reason I'm saying this is just came to my mind. I watched Anger Management. You can tell I watch a lot of movies, and um, your boy, the therapist, asked the guy, "Tell me who you are," and he couldn't tell the therapist who he was, and if you saw the movie, it triggered him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're doing this, what are some of the things that people have a problem really explaining to you that should be emotionally intelligent like this?
I one I actually ask a different question, because I think, tell me about yourself. I want to know what's relevant to the job, right? Like, if I say, tell me about yourself, and you're like, well, I've got 4 kids and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, now we're going into protected class territories. Like, I don't actually want to know about your family. I don't want to know about where you live. I don't want to
Right,
know about your veteran status. These are all things that can present a bias, right, for an interviewer.
right.
So I say, tell me why we're here today.
That's pretty
And,
pretty smart.
and it's still broad,
Yeah.
right? They can talk about, well, I'm looking for growth opportunities, or like, I really love this role, or this, but it's still got a better boundary around it. So, in any case, that's a question I like going in with. And then, the more like structured, behavioral based interview questions.
Hmm.
Yeah, when you ask a question like, tell me about yourself, people go in all sorts of ways, and they then end up telling you every possible thing. You're like, we only have 30 minutes. So, you got to keep it tight and relevant. And that's particularly tends to be more difficult, of course, if you have very little interview experience.
Right.
So it's just unfair to present a question like that, I think, to a candidate. And just people who tend to be like long-winded and just gabby. That's how they've been successful, is like, I don't know what we talked about with that person, but they talked a lot and it kind of sounded like they knew what they were talking about. So I guess I'll move them forward. Like that type of person, like also just goes everywhere in an interview, and can easily be passed forward just because they're nice, they're friendly, right? They're jovial, like you had a good time.
Yeah.
Like, well, that is not an indication. That's, it's nice that they weren't a jerk to you, for sure. But it's, not a great indication of like how well they're going to do in the role.
How do you know what? How do you let a person down without letting them down? Like you always hear this.
Mm,
You know, well, we got some other candidates, but you're in the running. What is that really? What is
yeah,
that really? Is that a code that you guys use to say I really don't want him? But so that way he or she doesn't come back and do something that doesn't make any sense. How do you do that?
sure. Yeah, if you've reviewed a resume, that person deserves at minimum that applicant tracking system response, via email that says, thank you, we've reviewed your resume, but we're moving forward with higher qualified candidates that we think are a better fit for the role. And I thank you for applying. Please stay in touch. That's at minimum, right? Like, close the loop. They took the time to apply. You looked at their resume, send them a freaking email, right? You could mass send emails to folks. It's not hard. Do not ghost your candidates,
Right.
please. Anyway, so that's one layer, one level. And then if they've gone through an interview process and you've got feedback, this is where it gets a little tough, right? Because HR, again, they're thinking about all the legal ramifications of giving someone like too much information and whether or not that's going to come back. So but you can still be simply put that we thought you had experience, and like good experience. We do have higher qualified candidates, or more qualified candidates, or candidates who we think are a closer fit for this role and what it demands. And so we're moving forward with them. But we really thank you, for the time you took, because we know that you have a lot of options to consider when applying. And so we don't take this lightly that you spend some time with us. Again, super simple. You can do that in a call, and they could maybe ask for some specific feedback. And a lot of times it's company policy, like we don't go beyond, what we're describing for you today. But the fact that you had an interview does mean that we think you have skills, right? You do have skills that are of interest, right, to us.
Mm.
So take that as a positive, right?
Mm.
That we did interview you, so that's a big deal.
Was it difficult for you to pivot into something that you're doing now? Because the
Ugh.
reason I said that was
Mhm.
because let's go back to what you said when we first started the interview. You really took an interest in the people that you was overseeing. So was it difficult for you to pivot at this point after the breakdown?
I mean, at that point, no. I knew that or actually early when I was going through my first master's in organizational development. At that time, I thought I am meant to work with systems, not within systems. But I didn't have that, I thought, enough of that lived leadership experience, right? Like in the trenches dealing with real stuff, to go out on my own as a consultant and, be operating under my own banner. So I stayed inside, to the detriment of my system, my internal operating system, until my back was against a wall. And that does happen to a lot of consultants, is that
What do you mean you're back
they
against the wall? What does that
I
mean?
couldn't back against the wall. I had no other choice.
Okay.
right? But to leave and try something else. I probably, realistically was kind of like running from burnout, looking back at my, tenure, is that like one company would work just tirelessly to right a ship, to, get our house in order. And then once like the crisis kind of period was done, and there was that kind of next level of transformation that we could move into, and that people didn't want to move into. They're like, "Oh, people aren't leaving, as much as they were leaving, so I don't need the mirror held up anymore. Thank you." But no, thank you. That I was then asked to do really tactical stuff that is not where my zone of genius is. I am a change agent. I am really good at change management and getting us from point A to point B. But you can't really slow down, right? You settle in, and then those habits solidify, and then you get just kind of stale again. And that is a recipe for all sorts of disasters in an organization if you get complacent.
Right.
So in any case, I would work super hard, and there wouldn't be this like reciprocal like relationship with my external environment. I'll put it like work didn't love me back,
Right.
and I was loving work, and that's a learning lesson for me, right? It's like that's not a real that's not a fair relationship, right? Um, so from one place to the next, I'd get excited about the new thing. I'd dive in, learn all the things, get into it, and then there'd be like at that 3-year mark, I'd be like, all right, that's enough. We've kind of had enough. We need you to slow down. And then I'd move on to the next thing until right I had tapped out, and I hadn't been, again, attempting to meet the needs of everyone else around me and teaching everyone to do the right thing for themselves, and to set the proper boundaries and etc. I completely ignored my own needs, and burned out. So back against the wall, I was like, let's give it a go. let's let's see if I can do this on my own, and take all the favorite parts of what I was doing, right, in my internal roles, and turn that into a business where I get to support the people who were most often in my office, who they may not have, self-identified or offered a diagnosis, although that definitely did happen because it's HR, but who tended to be the neurodivergent, the highly sensitive, the certainly creative, out of the box thinkers who were just like square pegs being like squeezed into round holes, the introverts, right? These were the people who were coming to my office going like, this is too much, and I'm like not able to like leverage my gifts in this environment, which is over indexing on the move fast, break things, make fast decisions, like don't think about the long-term consequences, just do it now, right? Like type of environments.
How do you get the? This is a two-part question.
Mhm.
What individuals are best suited for your program, and more importantly, you're talking about a complete mind alteration shift in individuals that have been what they might think in a role, but not. Let me go deeper with this. Let's use COVID for example. When a lot of jobs were eliminated and people started to work from home, you've seen a lot of people that were realized, hopefully they realized, a few did, that their identity was attached to what they did. They were no longer uh, what we might call human. They was CEO, and the CEO was gone, but that's all they knew. They was a president in theory. They're no longer president no more. All jobs have been declassified, restructured, reorganized. So to go back to your program, what you created, how do you take individuals and basically reprogram them into thinking the way in which naturally you've already had that gift? Does that make any sense?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you're touching on the word there, which is absolutely a core part of what I do, which is identity. And we're seeing that again with this AI, right? Revolution. This is yet another industrial revolution for us, where the machines are taking our jobs, and our identities are completely threatened, and our jobs are as well, right? The organizations, people who are running those organizations are implementing and adopting AI, and where we're not realizing gains immediately in the short term, we're then cutting out humans, as opposed to maybe throttling back a little bit on this, AI thing that we don't yet fully understand and are just aggressively hoping is going to work. And that's obviously terrifying. And this is on the heels of all the PTS that we have still from the pandemic.
Mhm.
They're like, yes, it's over, but the emotional like ripple effect, right, is still that, okay, I lost my job then. Am I going to lose my job again? Or so and so lost their job. Are they going to, like, yeah, there's just been too much change too fast for everyone's human system, I would say, to properly process this change.
Mhm.
Right, first industrial revolution, we had generations to deal with, okay, the mechanization, right, of workplaces, or like the electrification of the United States took 40 years. Okay, the internet took about 15 years for it to get across the United States. Like, we've just shortened, and AI, we've been doing this for like now 4 years. Like,
Mhm.
it's too much. It's too much for this system, the only system we have, right? Like, there's no way of, we don't evolve that fast, right? Like, we can be adaptive, but there's such a thing as too much change too fast, especially on the heels of a traumatic event like COVID-19. So I work across multiple dimensions with a leader. And again, a leader could be just someone who's leading themselves, right? An individual contributor, because that's the foundation. But it could be someone who's leading others, or they're at that director level leading other leaders across the aisle, or they're actually leading an enterprise. So I work at all four of those levels. But the dimensions too, where it's like where an issue could live in how someone is effectively navigating themselves and their environment, is it could be on that individual internal level of identity and perception and beliefs and emotions. And oftentimes you got to solve for that first before you can move outside of that to, okay, well, how do I behave as a leader? What are the skills I need and the habits I have? And looking at workload to, okay, what system am I in, and what system is going to be best for my internal operating system, and what's the structure and processes and resources I have available to me, to even beyond that, okay, well, all of these systems are operating inside of this broader collective context of our society and culture, and where we're developing trust and meaning in relationships. So yeah, that identity piece, oftentimes, again, a leader might be looking outside of themselves and going like, my boss sucks, or my this business sucks, or oh, they're laying everybody off. And like, we have to go in, right, and ask ourselves, are we attached
Mhm.
to all of this too
So,
much?
how much of this has to be deprogrammed? And more, what I guess I'm saying is, I guess you have to follow your what you talked about at first. I think you have to look and take strong accountability within yourself to see if you even have the skill sets. Kind of like what you said, if you don't tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, you're not going to be able to get to these levels. So, how much of this is really true confessions when they come to you and say, look, this is where I'm weak. This is what I have a struggle with. I never should have been in this situation, or I'm in this situation, but clearly I didn't get the proper training. So, how authentic do you have to be to make the program that you have successful for the individual?
Mhm. And how vulnerable.
And how vulnerable? Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. That vulnerability is absolutely the key. And this is really hard when you've never done this before, right? If you haven't had an influence in your life where you've seen vulnerability in a leader and how somebody else has articulated, I don't have all the answers, and, or I messed up, or, like, you really saved me on this, and thank you. And, this is why I like having you on my team. Like, that's all vulnerable by sharing that, like, you don't have it all figured out. That is all vulnerable, and to use like Brene Brown's terminology, daring leadership, right? That's courageous, right? To not just be stoic and like have all the answers type of leader. So yeah, it absolutely requires vulnerability in order to be authentic.
Let me ask you a couple more questions. Why is there a need for this program? Let me go two-part question. Why is there a need for this program that you created? And more importantly, you touched on something I think a lot of people don't understand. We're living in we're shifting the paradox. We're going into AI, whether we want to or not. I'm pretty sure you've seen the movie I Robot, and you've seen the people becoming dependent. So, is there a real would, from your opinion, will there be a need for leaders? Because right
Mm,
now, pretty much everything is we have now become dependent, so to speak, on the AI. I remember growing up, you probably do too. We had to remember our phone number. We had to remember your address. Now we had to know how to read a map. We had to learn latitude and longitude. All of this now is just like the push of a button. And now, if even leaders can push the button and get things done. So, is the new evolution of AI handicapping the ability to create great human leaders?
so great question. I talk about this quite a bit. Like, what role do we have as leaders in the age of AI and automation?
Right.
And I specifically, because it's my lived experience as a highly sensitive person, I talk about how highly sensitive people, those who are intensely feeling, deeply thinking, conscientious people, also kind of tend to be in this neurodivergent space, are uniquely suited to lead in the AI era because their natural traits, deep processing, empathy, high emotional intelligence match the exact non-automatable skills required to manage complex human systems.
Right.
And AI is automating routine tasks, which is making the gap that I see between like tactical management and human centered leadership
Right.
that provides purpose and ethical clarity and psychological safety. Those things have always been our competitive advantage,
Mhm.
but they are now absolutely in AI and in the role of AI and automation being highlighted as such. The difference between a manager who knows how to do those things and doesn't is just so clear.
Yeah.
And I will call out that you can nurture what doesn't come naturally. The role of leadership is human relationships.
Mhm.
Leadership is creating a space where someone who hasn't been there before feels safe enough to make a mistake.
Mhm.
Leadership is akin to the parent child relationship. And when someone leaves their parent's house, they should expect to go to an organization where they receive the same type of care,
Mhm.
where I'm not stewarding you through how to do your chores, right? Like, that is what your parents did, and they taught you all sorts of things that you needed to learn through like adolescence. But I am teaching you how to be a professional human being, a steward of your team and of the planet, and how to be culturally sensitive because, oh, we're actually working not just across the team next door to you, but the team in another country. Like, that is what leadership is. And that remains until humans aren't doing anything together anymore. Leadership absolutely remains.
Mhm.
And we do need to make the distinction between what is automatable by AI and, yeah, toss that stuff to the machine, and what is what we augment, right, of our leadership.
Right.
So we can automate routine, low level complexity stuff, and the data analysis
Right.
for that superficial layer of the business intelligence.
Right.
But then the judgment, the critical thinking, the analytical thinking, the creative thinking, the ethical
Because
decision making,
AI
that
can
lives
do
with
that
humans.
part of the
No,
technology. It doesn't have the human factor. So, uh,
no,
let me go here
it does not have context.
for our last question, and let me say thank you for coming on and sharing such great knowledge. Uh,
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your program in general, how it can help individuals go to that next level.
Sure. So I offer an advisory service where I work with someone one on one. Again, regardless of where they're at in their leadership journey, whether they're an individual contributor navigating just their own operating system in this new system, this way of work, to I'm a CEO leading the enterprise, and I need to create the conditions that enable the entire organization to adapt, perform, and endure. I work at all those levels, and I work across those four dimensions of what's happening internally at that individual level, to what your behavior looks like, to the systems you're operating in your organization, to the collective society that what we do inside of these organizations are impacting. So I diagnose. I think we work together to diagnose the whole system, internal and external, not just maybe an obvious part.
Right.
And the outcome is an adaptive human system that can sense and decide and evolve so that we are much more resilient and capable of adapting to change. And we're not fighting it, but we can actually flourish in it.
Let me ask this last question. With your method, what's been the difference between a man and a woman both on equal scales after they done your program? Have you noticed a difference in overall leadership skills and between both of them, the man and the woman?
Mhm. I have there have been no there's no statistical difference between like a man's ability to leverage these to leverage this program, to leverage this relationship, to develop the skill sets to be an emotionally intelligent leader. There is zero difference statistically between sexes, between genders, between ethnic backgrounds, between anything. Humans are so much more similar than we are different. There, of course, are differences in our upbringing and our cultural backgrounds that impact, our tendencies. But those are parts of ourselves that we can acknowledge. That I grew up in an environment that had a tendency to whatever the thing is, and I don't want to act on that tendency. I want to develop the self-awareness to know that I have a kind of reaction to this thing.
Mhm.
And through neuroplasticity, and we know that this is true with neuroscience, right, is that you can rewire practically anything
Mhm.
so that your behavior is representative of the person you want to be.
Mhm.
So that's also a part of what we do. Is we actually, one of the steps in the process is around defining, right, what your purpose is,
Mhm. How
right, and
long
what
does
your
it
core values are.
how long does it take to see some type of results from using your method?
I have had people do complete 180s in a 90-minute intensive session, and like CEO who was questioning her leadership entirely and whether she should be the leader of this business that she had started, because as I describe it, she was leading as if she had someone else's nervous system. She was a highly sensitive person, also had ADHD, and was trying to lead as if she was, again, like I will just call it like the traditional, like masculine, stoic, etc., right, type of always on leadership. And despite a track record, an immense record of success, was questioning whether she should actually lead her company through the next phase of growth. And in this 90-minute session, we completely turned that around to I have been successful not despite of myself and the way that my neurology, right, is, but actually because of it. And I see all these examples now in my past for how the way that my brain was actually and is advantageous, and is exactly the type of leader I'm supposed to be, and the empathetic leader that my team and the system needs, and the work that we're doing to help the world. So as short as 90 minutes. I've had some turnarounds in 30, but that's pretty quick, kind of rare. And otherwise, there is never a point in anyone's life where you will have probably reached, self-actualization. And so the goal isn't to get through a program. I don't have a package. I don't have we work together for 5 steps and then boom, you're done, go forth. We work through a challenge, however long it takes to work through that challenge until there is a meaningful shift. And then it's okay, now we have this visibility into ourselves and our external environment. Now what? What's the biggest constraint? Let's tackle that.
Wow, that sounds awesome. How can the viewers reach out to you to know more about your program and all the goodies that you got to help take them to the next level of leadership?
Sure. The easiest place to find me is at my website, which is www.siralaurel.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram. You can find me on the social channels.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you subscribe, like, share, follow, click that button. All it takes is one click to make a difference in your life or to change somebody else's. Baby girl, thank you so much for coming on, sharing such a beautiful story, that beast mindset, resilience. I wish you the best. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
this has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.